Welcome everybody to the Long Play Recap. We've got a double header this time, and don't forget there's going to be some major spoilers ahead. First of all, we have Baldur's Gate 3. After destroying everyone outside the goblin base, we head inside and we skulk in the shadows of the rafters to scope out the leaders of the goblin camp to take them out. We decide to soften them up with a little friend we found earlier, the mighty Beholder. After it gets taken out, we move in and clear the rest of the camp out. We then save the druid leader Halsin from his jail cell and head back to the druid grove. In the grove, we speak with the refugee leader and we tell him that the way's clear now for them to head out. And since we probably won't return to the grove ever again, we'll take their idol as a little souvenir. After that, we head back down to the Underdark to plunder a mysterious wizard tower. And then we take a boat ride to the Dark Dwarf encampment. As we run through the encampment, we learn that an agent of the Absolute is here, trapped in a cave-in. We also find out that the dwarves are done with him and want him dead, so we strike a little deal with them. We find the explosives needed to clear out the cave-in, and we blow up the rocks to clear the way. We do a quick meet and greet with Nair, the agent of the Absolute, and then we head deeper into the area where we find the Adamantine Forge. Oh, and this guy too. Now this was a pretty tough fight, but after crushing the Guardian a few times, we managed to beat him and forge ourselves some new armor. And that's pretty much all we've done in our latest session of Baldur's Gate 3 so far. Coming up, we have Dungeon Munchies. The last time we left our hero, we had escaped the big bad guy seconds before being obliterated, and ended up in Sarsaspahara City, where we were looking for the legendary cookbook. Along the way, we meet up with our old friend the Cone and his new vegetable government. It's not going well for him, and he's losing control of his people. So he decides to fight us to save face, but we easily destroy him. We find the cookbook, but the big bad putrid finds us as well. So the team tries one last gambit to create the ultimate dish, a cosmic bubble tea. By using the tea, we open a pocket dimension and jump inside. However, all of our friends get captured by putrid. In that dimension, we find the presidential keycard. We needed that so we can open the Stargate so we can leave the planet. Also, we've learned that the coordinates to the new Earth colony are stored in our zombie head. Once we leave the pocket, we get an ultimatum. Open the Stargate for Putrid, or he consumes all of our friends. So we do what all good heroes do and surrender to the bad guys. But it seems that we had a final gambit, because Simmer, our necromancer friend, possessed our body prior to jumping into the pocket dimension, and she manages to free us from Putrid's claws. And so we have our final battle with Putrid. We go through many boss phases, but in the end we manage to win and save the day. And so ends the playthrough of Dungeon Munchies. It was quite a strange little game. Pretty unique, I'd say. The humor and writing can be hit or miss, but in the end it was a decent playthrough. Next, we have Shantae and the Pirate's Curse. The last time we left our half-genie protagonist, we were heading towards a new area called the Mud Bog Island. In this land of the dead, we meet a guardian who's blocking the way to the village of the Lost Souls. And boy, did we get stuck here for a while. It turns out we had to go back to the Spiderweb Island and use that downthrust ability we found earlier to unearth a fossilized death mask. With that mask, the Guardian lets us through, and after a few coin puzzles and acquiring the manly musk, we get access to the next dungeon, the Oubliette of Suffering. In that dungeon, we get our next upgrade, Risky's Boots, which allows us to do a super dash through blocks and enemies. At the end of the dungeon, we fight Dagron, a giant dragon, and once we beat him, we get the map to the next area, Frostbite Island. On Frostbite Island, we are tasked to find a targeting module for the ammo baron, and so we go up to Propeller Town to find it. And I gotta say, this area was actually pretty tricky. A lot of platforming and tight jumps. It was much harder than anything we faced so far. Eventually, we make it to the top, get the module, and we bring it to the Baron, and that opens up the next dungeon, the Abandoned Factory. In the factory, we find our next upgrade that allows us to do 3 consecutive cannonball jumps, which will help us tremendously for future platforming. At the end of the dungeon, we find the boss, the Steel Maggot, and with the help of the cannon, we dispatch it easily. And that gives us access to the final island, the Lonely Grave. We travel to the grave and a scene plays out where the evil pirate master has risen from his grave and has captured Risky Boots. And he has taken over Scuttletown and the palace. So we make our way to the palace, we go through a platforming gauntlet, and finally we reach the final boss of the game, the Pirate Master. After a long and tough fight, Shantae regains her genie powers and defeats the Pirate Master once and for all, and saves the day. And that ends the playthrough for Shantae and the Pirate's Curse. It was a pretty good Metroidvania, a net improvement to the previous game, and I'm actually looking forward to the sequel. Coming up, we have Drakengard. Now this is a new playthrough, and we play as Kame, a royal prince whose kingdom was destroyed by the Empire, and he fights to avenge his parents and also to protect his sister, the goddess February. The game starts us off where the Empire is assaulting the castle where February is hiding in. Kame and the Union army are in the field fighting to push back the Empire's attack, but the battle is going poorly, and Kame gets mortally wounded in the conflict. Now, the gameplay in this game is kind of similar to the old Dynasty Warrior games. We're going to be fighting hundreds of enemies at every single location. Now, as the Empire's army is pouring into the castle, Kame rushes in to stop them, only to find a trapped and dying dragon in the courtyard. Kame gives it a choice: to make a blood pact with him, saving both their lives, or he would slay the dragon here and now. And so, with no other choice, they make their pact, tying their lives together and saving them both, but at a cost of Kame losing his voice. With his newfound power, Kame fights back the Empire's attack and saves the goddess and her fiancé Inuart. Since the castle is no longer safe, they go with Inuart's suggestion to flee to the elf village. Its neutrality should save them from the Empire. Once they make it to the village, they find it razed to the ground. Inuart is in full despair, cursing his weakness and his inability to protect February. So they decide to head out to the desert temple where the hierarch Verdale resides. He's one of the guardians of the Four Seals, just like the goddess. Unfortunately, before Kame can get there, Inuart and Verdale get captured by the Empire. So we head out there to save them. We find Verdale, but Inuart is nowhere to be found. We learn from Verdale that the Empire seeks to destroy the seals and unseal the seeds of resurrection. We also get a cutscene of Inuart getting brainwashed by the Empire. His weakness and jealousy of Kame pushes him over the edge, and he needs more strength to get the attention and love from February. Because obviously there's a weird love triangle going on between Kame, his sister, and Inuart. Meanwhile, Kame tries to stop the Empire from breaking the desert seal, but he is too late. As the party rests in the camp, trying to figure out what to do next, a black dragon shows up, and its rider is Inuart. It seems like he has also made a pact with the dragon. Kame tries to fight him back, but he's too weak, and Inuart captures Furie and takes her to the Empire. Also, all the seals are now broken except for Furie's. So Kame and the remaining Union army head towards the Empire to save her. The armies clash in the field, and somehow the Union army wins easily. A bit too easily. As they look to the sky, giant fireballs fall from above, decimating the Union army, whilst the Empire is rising from the dead to fight again. Kame gets on his dragon and flies to the floating fortress to save his sister, and perhaps the world from destruction. Kame makes his way into the inner sanctum of the fortress, only to find his sister dead, with a dagger in her chest. Done in by the priestess of the Watchers, the leader of the Empire, called Mana. Inuart's brainwashing breaks, and he sees the lifeless body of Furie. And so he decides to take her to the Seeds of Resurrection and try to revive her. Kame tries to stop him, but to no avail. With nothing left, Kame decides to focus on his vengeance and go after the one who killed his sister, the priestess of the Watchers, Mana. And yeah, that was pretty long, but that's what happened so far in our playthrough of Drakengard. After Drakengard, we have Final Fantasy IX. Last we left our heroes, we were about to split our party into 4 teams of 2 to activate the 4 elemental shrines. And so we drop off Garnet and Aiko to the Water Shrine, Freya and Amaranth to the Fire Shrine, Vivi and Steiner to the Wind Shrine, and Zidane and Quina to the Earth Shrine. Now I know that's not the names we used in the game, but it's going to be simpler this way. Now I was worried about this part because most of the characters we dropped off were underleveled, but it turns out we only needed to care about the 2 in the Earth Shrine, which was Quina and Zidane. And Quina is our strongest character, so it went super well. We crushed the boss easily, and we got the gate open to Terra. And so we head to the Shimmering Isles and make our way into Terra. Now this gets a bit complicated, but I'll try to make sense of it the best way I can. Basically, Terra is an advanced civilization that was dying, and it assimilated other planets to survive. Garland was tasked with the assimilation, and he created genomes to help him with it. Genomes like Kuja, the game's main antagonist, but also Zidane, our hero. Learning this, our heroes confront Garland. After a quick fight with him, Kuja shows up and thanks the party for taking down Garland. And for a little extra, he's gonna wipe us out. The fight is easy enough until the momentum turns as Kuja achieves his new transform, and with his newfound power, unleashes the ultimate magic, Ultima, on the party, wiping them out. With his new strength, Kuja kicks the weakened Garland off the platform, telling him that he will rule the world in his place with his new power. But as he's falling, Garland hits Kuja with the truth bomb. Kuja is actually at the end of his lifespan. Time is running out for him. And so Kuja decides that if he's gonna die, he might as well bring everyone down with him. So the party escapes, and they make their way to Memoria, the place where the crystal, the life force of the planet, resides. So as the party pushes through, we fight a ton of bosses. Some of it went well. Others, well, let's just say I'm glad there was auto-saving. Eventually, we meet up with Kuja and fight him for one last time to save the world. After a long and tough fight, we defeat him and save the day. Well, not necessarily, because Necron shows up, a deity of death. And he also wants to end the world, so we gotta give him a little beatdown too. But boy, this fight was a slog. Now Necron's attacks weren't too strong, but his Grand Cross ability really put the team through the blender. Though in the end, we managed to win and save the life force and the crystal. And that's the end of Final Fantasy IX. Now, I wasn't a big fan of this game, but with the Maguri mod, it made it a lot more enjoyable, and I'm glad I used it to replay the game. Coming up, we have Rule of Rose. On our last session, we were searching for a lost teddy bear, and by now we're used to how these missions work. We run through the airship following the dog, avoiding most of the enemies. As we get to the elevator, we see Amanda taking it to the upper area. So we try to take the elevator and the power shuts off. So we gotta go back to the generator room. We fix the generator with the lever we found along the way, and we try to make it back to Amanda. Once we find her, she gives us the bear, but it gets stolen from us by a mysterious boy. So we chase after him, and we go through probably the most infuriating part of the game. We get locked into a really small area, and we need to find our way out multiple times. And I gotta say, again, the combat in this game is not its strong point. You are very slow, and you're as strong as a wet paper towel. After a few game overs, we finally find the bear and bring it to the aristocrats. As a reward for finding the bear, we get our own box of red crayons. And so the month ends and we start a new chapter called The Funeral. We find ourselves in the orphanage now, and it's cleaning time. And it's a really weird chapter gameplay-wise. All we need to do is find a child, talk to them, someone throws a paper ball filled with insults, and we repeat that process like 17 times. It's really monotonous. But once we collect everything, the day ends and the monsters come out at night. We find a door barred with 3 animal signs that leads to the courtyard. So that means another gauntlet of enemies to fight. Once we're through with that, we find Wendy in the courtyard petting Brown, our dog. And she tells us that there's going to be another meeting of the Aristocrats Club today. After that, Wendy leaves and our dog is also gone. Eventually, we make it to the attic where the club is, and we're greeted by Wendy and the rest of the members. Amanda informs Jennifer that in the bloody bag was her poor friend Brown. Filled with rage, Jennifer finally loses it and slaps the crap out of Wendy, the leader of the club, and calls out the rest of the club for going along with this. It's also the first time we see Jennifer as a child. I think it symbolizes her coming to terms with her childhood trauma at the orphanage. Anyway, Wendy runs off crying and the chapter ends. Stray Dog and the Lying Princess is our final chapter. It starts off with the children starting a new club and wanting Jennifer to be the leader of it since Wendy left humiliated. Before Jennifer can answer, the kids see Wendy outside and decide to go see her. As we make our way to the lobby, we can hear the cries of children and the growling of a man outside. The door opens up and we see Joshua sending Old Man Gregory after us. This boss fight is probably the easiest one we faced. Unfortunately, it's also the last boss fight in the game. After beating him, we head outside where we find Joshua monologuing about not being loved by Jennifer. But it turns out it was actually Wendy all along who dressed up as Joshua, and she brought the stray dog Gregory to the orphanage to get revenge. She also gives us a gun before getting taken away by Gregory. And so we get our final showdown with Stray Dog in the front yard, with children's clothes strewn all over. It's not really a boss fight though. All you need to do to get the good ending is to give Gregory his gun back. And as he apologizes, he takes care of the rest. And so the game ends on an epilogue chapter where Jennifer comes to terms with her past and protects the memory of her lost puppy dog. And that ends Rule of Rose. Quite the strange little game. There's a lot of details that'll go over your head the first time you play it, but once you read into it, it makes a lot more sense. Next, we have Arcana. After rescuing Sarah in the last chapter, we let her rest in the elf village as we make our way to the Endless Tower. They call it endless not because it has many floors, but because there's an endless amount of enemies. Eventually, we run into Dara, our first boss fight in the tower. He's not too much of a challenge, he goes down pretty easily. And after beating him, we get our final elemental spirit, the Earth Spirit Tao. We continue on only to find our path barred by a locked door with no way to open it. We head back to the elf village. In the village, Sarah is all well and rested, and she joins us to brave the tower once more. We head back to the door, and it turns out it can only be opened with royal family blood. And conveniently enough, Sarah is a princess, so we're able to push through. We reach the 4th floor, where we get stopped in the middle of it. It seems like we were tricked, and the earth spirit that we got was actually a boss in disguise. Also, Dara's back for more. Again though, the fight against the duo was not that much more difficult, and once we defeated them, we get the real earth spirit. We reach the 7th floor where Alan is waiting for us. He lets us know that Tifa, Sarah's sister, is currently assisting him in the revival of Rimsala. And so our protagonist Rooks decides to duel Alan on his own. After defeating him, he starts revealing Galneon's true goal. Now Galneon, if you remember, is the story's big bad wizard who took control of the land of Elemen by killing its king. But before Alan can finish, Galneon shows up, and he hits Alan with an Armageddon spell, killing him instantly. Galneon briefly speaks to our hero, telling him that he also killed his parents, and baits him to come after him. That enrages Rooks, and he rushes after him alone without his party. Climbing up the tower, we find Darwin on the 8th floor, and he joins us. As we blow through the enemies, we reach the 11th floor, where Galneon awaits us with Tifa, who seems to be brainwashed, so we fight her as well. It's not a tough fight, but she did keep paralyzing us, which was pretty annoying. Eventually, we do beat her, break the spell over her, and Darwin leaves the party to take care of her. We reach the top floor where Galneon is. Axe and Sarah catch up with us, but we're too late to stop the revival of Rimsala. Axe sacrifices himself to buy us some time so we can escape the tower. Back in town, we learn that while Rimsala did revive, her power isn't fully restored. And if we can find the legendary weapons, we could stop her. So we head to the castle, where supposedly there's a tunnel that leads back into the tower. In the castle, our first boss we encounter is Karul, a subordinate of Alan, who thinks that we're the ones who killed him. After a quick thrashing, we find that he had the legendary crystal sword. That is 1 out of 3 legendary treasures we needed. We then encounter Galneon again, seemingly mad with power. We take him out easily. He actually was barely a challenge at all. And with that, we get the secondary legendary item, the Enchanted Jewel. Shockingly, Galneon was not so easily defeated because he rises back to life as Zombion. But he is no match against the combined power of the party, and he goes down for a second time. And funny enough, he also had the 3rd legendary treasure with him too, the Spirit Sword. So we now have all 3 treasures. We make our way back into the tower, climb all the way up to the upper floors, and we get ambushed by 2 golems. Just as we're preparing to fight them, Axe and Sarah appear, telling us to press on since there's no time to lose, and they'll hold the golems back. So we leave them with the golems and we move on through. We reach the 11th floor where a Tiamat awaits us, and just like before, our party decides to split up to hold the enemy back so Rooks can reach Rimsala in time. Once we reach the top floor, we enter the summoning room where Rimsala awaits us. And I gotta mention that it's pretty bold to have allies throughout the whole game, and they make you fight the final boss alone. Anyhow, this is a two-phased fight. As long as you keep your health topped up, you should be able to survive Rimsala's attacks. And that's it. We completed Arcana Seal of Rimsala. It was pretty nice to revisit an old classic, and with a patch that gives us a bit more quality of life and rebalances the game a bit. Now, if you're looking for a simple RPG on the SNES, you can't really go wrong with this, so I definitely recommend it. Next, we have Earth Defense Force 6. After saving the base in our previous mission, we head out to defend the city from the Ergonus. Now, just to recap on what's happened so far, we're on the 9th time loop in this war against the Primers. And normally, the Ergonus is a massive problem. It's strong and it's near invincible against normal weapons. It would be unstoppable until late into the war. But since we saved the base, the giant crane robot Barga is available, and the EDF sends it out early to take care of the Ergonus. We hop in and we punch it into oblivion, securing a huge win for the Force, and it even makes them consider upgrading the Barga to fight other giant monsters in the future. After a few more missions, we reach mission 131, where we try to make our way to the alien Mothership 11, the flagship of the Primers. And in my opinion, this is the hardest mission in the game. As we approach the flagship, we are swarmed with monsters, so the mission changes to clearing out the area first. As we fight back the kings and queen type monsters, teleportation pillars fall into the area, and the sky fills with the haze enemies. They're little squid-like monsters that have a long-range stabbing attack, and if you stand in one area for too long, your health will hit zero real quick. Normally, you'd want to destroy the teleportation pillars to stop them from spawning, but each time you do so, there's two elite drones that show up, and if you don't deal with them, they will deal with you. But eventually, we get the best of them and clear the mission. On the next mission, we join the assault against Mothership 11. It's going well until the flagship decides to fight back, breaking down into a sphere, shielded by its other parts. After a barrage of bullets, we reach the core of the ship, and just like every other spaceship, we fire at the bright red core and take it down. And that gives a significant edge to the EDF in this war. We reach a point where the Primers become desperate, and they send all their kaiju, the giant monsters, as a pack together. And there's only one way to stop that, with the new and improved Barga and its powerful copper cannons. Now, this is a pretty fun mission, really showcases what makes EDF 6 great, and after blasting all the giant monsters, the mission ends, and all that's left to do is to stop the time ring. Unfortunately, there's no way to stop the alien ships from going back in time to change the past and ruin the EDF. We're stuck in a loop, and eventually, we're gonna mess up. Unless, by sheer coincidence, we end up at the right time where the future ships arrive in the past, and we stop them from interfering with the present. At some point, we just luck out, and we find the exact point of arrival, and this time, we make sure that the future will remain unchanged. After clearing the mission, we have one last job to do, and that's to take out the time ring. Without the ring, the primers will not be able to send endless monsters and troops from the future, and their attack on Earth should end. So we charge into the fray with the Storm Team, the EDF's elite force, strike at the Red Core and save the day, right? Well, not exactly. The ring flips over to its other side, and it turns out there's another core to destroy. Once we destroy it, the ring flips over and it's done for. Oh, wait, no, it's actually facing downwards now. And several armored tentacle-like cannons appear and just bombard the whole area. And there's almost no cover from all those bullets. After barely surviving the onslaught, we fire at the core and destroy the time ring, saving the day and getting rid of the No, they're back again. It turns out that this new ship is from the far future, a future where the ring got destroyed, so they sent another ship. Seemingly, this battle with the primers will never end, so the EDF pull one last gambit, one little trick that might save the day. They launch a dirty bomb on Mars to spread contaminants all over the planet, killing any chance of future life, and with that, preventing the primers from ever existing. But something strange happens, and the ship evolves. It turns out that bomb made a time paradox. If the primers don't exist, then the EDF never gets to be created. And if the EDF doesn't exist, Mars doesn't get bombed. The only thing that can resolve the paradox is the concept of time itself. It will either choose humanity or the primers to keep on existing. The time ship represents the primers, and we are humanity's representative, and we have to duke it out to exist. And so, in the end, after a long battle, humanity wins. And that's the end of the game, for real this time. Now, I loved playing this, and I definitely recommend it to anyone. And the best part of this is that the multiplayer is even better than the single player. So if you're looking for a fun little game to play with your friends, check it out. It's worth your time. Following that, we have Phoenix Wright Ace Attorney. We start a new case where we have to defend Will Powers, an actor of a children's TV show who's been accused of murdering his co-star Jack Hammer. Now, Will Powers says that he was sleeping during the time of the murder, which was at 2:30 p.m. After a bit of investigating, we learned that only 4 people were present at the studio during the time of the murder, and we also find that a picture was taken near the gate of the studio, and it was a picture of the Steel Samurai, Will Powers' costume, and it was taken at 1 p.m. The costume does seem a bit off, as the samurai was limping. After exhausting our clues, we head to the courtroom for the first day of the trial. Miss Oldbag, the security guard, gets to the stand and we cross-examine her. We learn that she was there when Powers was injured during the rehearsal, and also that a young child was in the vicinity of the murder. But unfortunately, the prosecution is pressing to wrap this case up. So we try to buy some time and accuse the security lady of being the actual murderer. She cracks under the pressure, and she reveals that there were actually other people at the studio, the director and the assistant director, but she was told to keep it a secret. With this new information, the case gets extended for another day, and that allows us to investigate the new suspects. The director and the assistant director don't really provide us many clues, but we do learn that the child saw the murder happen. Also, the detective overheard everything, and the child will become a key witness for the ensuing trial. On the second day of the trial, we cross-examine the child's testimony. After pointing out some inconsistencies, the child reveals that the person in the steel samurai costume was the one who actually died. He was the victim. So the trial gets pushed to its final day. We go back to the studio to find some more clues, and we learn that the deceased Jack Hammer was being blackmailed by the director. We confront her in her trailers, but she calls in her thugs to take care of us. Thankfully, we get saved by the detective. Andy Vasquez, the director, gets taken into custody as a suspect for the final day of the trial. And yeah, that's pretty much it for Ace Attorney for this session. Coming up, we have Yakuza 5. And oh boy, where do I even begin with this? We're at the final chapter of the game where all our protagonists get ready to go to the Japan Dome to stop Haruka's assassination. While Haruka, Kiryu's adopted daughter, well, she's getting ready for her big Idol concert. Before the squad can head out, an emergency news report pops up on TV. The Millennium Tower has been taken over, and Goro Majima, who's a key figure in the series, has been taken captive. So the team decides to head there first instead, and once they get there, they find themselves surrounded by the Yakuza from the Omi Alliance. So they decide to split up. Saejima will infiltrate the tower to save Majima, while Shinada will head to the Japan Dome to stop the assassination, because he's an ex-baseball player and he knows the place, while Kiryu and Akiyama will just duke it out outside against 200 Yakuza goons. Meanwhile, the Idol concert begins and the clock is ticking before the assassin strikes. Now everyone has joined together to fight to protect Haruka's dream. So Saejima makes it to the rooftop of the Millennium Tower first, where Kurosawa, the leader of the Omi Alliance, is waiting with Majima, and he gives him an ultimatum. Saejima needs to fight Majima to the death and win to stop Kurosawa from calling the hit on Haruka. So they duke it out, because that's the only way we solve any problems in the series. Eventually, they fight to a standstill, but this was all part of the plan to stall it out so Shinada could stop the assassin. It also turns out that the assassin has already chickened out and was leaving the stadium, but since Shinada needs a final boss, they also fight, because that's the Yakuza way. Meanwhile, between sets, Haruka catches news footage of Kiryu duking it out in front of the Millennium Tower, and she is shocked to see him there. Now, going back to the rooftop, Kurosawa is pretty pissed about the situation, so he decides to kill Saejima and Majima, but they get saved by the leader of the Tojo clan, Daigo. With nothing left, Kurosawa spills the beans on why he did all of this, on why he wanted to eliminate all the charismatic leaders of the clans, and the reason for it is because he wanted to leave a legacy and the control of the clans to his successor before dying. Daigo lets Kiryu know that the successor is already at the Tojo headquarters, so he splits off with Akiyama. And since Akiyama also needs a final boss, he fights Kanai again, for like the 15th time already. So it all culminates to this point. Kiryu reaches the Tojo headquarters where everyone is already dead. He heads inside to find who the successor really is, and it's Aizawa. Remember him? Doesn't really matter, because all he wants is to fight Kiryu and best him in battle so he can be the top dog. But it turns out he ain't got that dog in him, and Kiryu beats him down despite being injured. And in the end, the dreams are saved, and Haruka can continue her idle dream. And nope, she decides to throw it all away because she realizes that while dreams are important, family is the most important thing. And she gives up being an idol so she can return back to her family and Kiryu. All the while, Kiryu is outside bleeding out in the streets of Kamurocho. He faints, but Haruka is there to save him. And that's it. That's Yakuza 5 recapped. It was all about living out your dreams and the sacrifices it took to get there, until it wasn't. And if you thought we were done with the Yakuza series, here comes Yakuza 6, and the story starts right where we left it off. Kiryu's now in the hospital recovering from his injuries. As Haruka looks after him, the police show up to arrest Kiryu for that brawl that happened at the Millennium Tower. Now, Kiryu could lawyer up and get the charges dropped, but he wants to do his time so he can return back to a peaceful life as a civilian and take care of his orphanage in peace. So Kiryu goes back to jail for 3 years while Haruka goes back to the orphanage to take care of the kids there. While it might look like everything is okay on the surface, Haruka is cracking under the pressure of the bad press she's been getting after announcing to the world that she's related to a Yakuza leader, and it's been affecting the kids at the orphanage. So she decides that it would be better if she left them, so she leaves once everyone's asleep during the night. During that time, Kamurocho's little Asia part of town caught fire. We have ominous, wealthy men smiling as they look at it burn down. 3 years go by and Kiryu finally returns home to the orphanage. As he gets reunited with everyone, Kiryu learns that Haruka left the orphanage shortly after he was in jail and hasn't been heard from since. Feeling responsible for what happened, Kiryu decides to find Haruka and bring her back. So he heads back to Kamurocho to look for her. We run into Akiyama, who's having a little trouble with the Chinese triad. After saving him, we get a phone call from Date, Kiryu's detective friend, telling us that Haruka's been in an accident. He should head over to the hospital. At the hospital, we learn that Haruka's in a coma. And also, shockingly, she had a child with her. Now, with the father nowhere to be found, the Child Protection Services want to bring the child to an orphanage, and they refuse Kiryu to be the guardian. So Kiryu freaks out and kidnaps the child and runs away with it. After meeting up with Date again, he tells Kiryu that he's found a clue on where the child's father might be located. It's in Hiroshima, the town of Onomishi. So Kiryu heads over there with the baby. Kiryu's then helped out by the local bartender, Kiyomi, and that annoys the local Yakuza captain, Tsuyoshi Nagumo. So we give him a little knuckle sandwich a few times and he calms down. After a few shenanigans with the baby, we run into Nagumo again at the bar, who's being harassed by another Yakuza patriarch. And since Kiryu can't keep out of any Yakuza business whatsoever, he goes and saves him. Nagumo is so grateful about being saved that he wants Kiryu to be his brother, which gives a real Yakuza 3 vibe. He brings Kiryu to his small family headquarters so he can meet his boss, and boy, that guy sure looks familiar. And yeah, that's pretty much it for Yakuza 6. Now for a change of pace, we've got Pokemon Platinum. Before we begin, I need to mention that the only mainline Pokemon game that I've played was Pokemon Blue. And speaking of Blue, our first Pokemon we choose is the Piplup. And so we'll go do our first battle with our rival and mop him up quickly, and we lost. I didn't even know that was possible. Anyhow, we make our way to Route 201. We make it to San Gem Town, where we load up on Pokeballs. We go back to Route 201 to get new Pokemon. The first one we find is a Doof, a normal type Pokemon. Then we get a Starly, a normal flying Pokemon. We then make our way to Route 202 and we pick up our next Pokemon, a Shinex, whatever he's called. He's an electric Pokemon. We then make our way to Jubilife City, and after a little side quest, we earn a new Pokewatch, or Poketch as they call it. And that does something, I'm not even sure, besides it giving time. Anyhow, we also get an old fishing rod, and we fish out the majestic Magikarp. Now I remember that one from Gen 1. We also run into an Abra, but like a magic trick, he disappears. We then continue on to Orberg Gate. We grab a few more Pokemon there. And this is what our roster looks like at the end of the session before calling it. Coming up, we have Mega Man Legends 2. This takes part 2 years after the events of the previous Legends game. Roll has sold all of Mega Man's equipment to fix up the ship, and they're headed towards the Forbidden Isle to meet up with Roll's grandfather and Werner von Blucher, the captain of the Sulphur Bottom. That's a giant ship that can penetrate the storm that surrounds the Forbidden Island. Before they can meet up, the Sulphur Bottom gets attacked by a mysterious woman with some kind of dragon, and the ship slowly drifts into the storm, unable to steer itself out. Now, unfortunately, Roll's airship cannot cross the storm, so they decide to stop by a nearby village to pick up some parts to build a dropship. They cross paths with a guy named Joe, who's headed towards the ruins, and Roll feels like she's met this person before, but she can't remember when. As we talk to the junk shop owner, he tells the duo that he's seen the same prototype in Joe's lab. So Mega Man decides to go to the ruins and find him. We find Joe deep inside the ruins in a pretty bad shape. As we're about to leave with him, he tells Mega Man that he has activated a Reaverbot by accident, and if it's not stopped, it will destroy the city. So we go deal with that real quick. Once it's defeated, we bring Joe to the hospital, where he explains that he has amnesia. And when he was found, he was holding the blueprints for the dropship, so he built it to gain access to the Forbidden Island, but it never came to pass. So he's giving the dropship to Roll and Mega Man as thanks for saving him. With the new ship, Mega Man makes it to the Forbidden Island to save the survivors of the Sulphur Bottom. While looking around, we stumbled into a weird floating diamond shape, which opens up and reveals a guy and a naked lady. That also stops the storm for some reason and saves the Sulphur Bottom from crashing. Now they bring everyone on board the ship, the Sulphur Bottom, and our newly found guests explain that they know of a mother lode, but it can only be found with keys hidden in the surrounding islands. But as they explain this, the pirates are listening in, and they want to get that treasure first. So it's a race against time for Mega Man and the crew to collect the keys before the pirates. We make it to Poked Island first, where we encounter Tron Bonne again, one of the main antagonists of the first game. After defeating her yet again, we find the ruins and explore them a little before calling it there for this session. Next, we have Super Paper Mario. We start Chapter 5, where we end up in some kind of prehistoric dimension called Crag. The villagers here are called Cragnons and have a very particular way of speaking. Very dude bro, surfer-esque lingo. Now it seems like they're in a bit of a jam. The Cragnons are being assaulted and kidnapped by the Floro-Sapiens, and we need to save them. We run into Ochunks again, but we smack him down pretty easily. We also find a new pixel called Kudge, and this guy is going to be really helpful as we can use him in battle as a hammer. We run into O'Chunks a second time, who's been brainwashed with a Fluoro Sprout, which now makes him more unpredictable. But we still crush him nonetheless. Eventually, we reach King Crocus, smack him around a few times, and we get the Pure Heart from him, ending Chapter 5. Once we get back to Flipside, the void grows larger, and we gotta hurry to the next chapter before the universe gets consumed. We head over to Chapter 6, where we find ourselves in a feudal Japan-like world. We also notice that the void here is massive. It's much larger than in Flipside. We meet King Samur, who offers us his Pure Heart, but only if we can defeat 100 of his Samur guys in a tournament. And boy, it really looked like we had to defeat them all. But after 20 or so fights, with the void growing to massive proportions, the Samur guys decide to postpone the tournament and let you through so you can see the king for the Pure Heart. But it turns out the king was actually Mimi in disguise. And this whole tournament was just to stall us until the void consumed the world. And she did it. We run out of time and the world is bleached clean of all life. We run into Mr. L in here and he takes the Pure Heart, which is now turned to stone, with him. So we fight him for it, and once we defeat him, we collect the stone Pure Heart. Meanwhile, Dementio pops in and catches Mr. L unaware and backstabs him, taking him out for good. Our heroes head back to Merlin to figure out what to do with the powerless Pure Heart, but Dementio pops in to say hello. And by hello, I mean he destroys the whole party the same way as Mr. L. Mario ends up alone in the underwear. That's where people end up when their game is over. Exploring the area, we run into Queen Jades, the Queen of the Underwear, who offers to fix the stone Pure Heart in exchange of finding her daughter Lovebee. While searching for Lovebee, we find Luigi, who's very glad to join us. And with that, we end our session of Super Paper Mario. Continuing on within the Mario universe, we've got Wario Land 3. We go back to the level where we got stuck on last time, and the solution was unbelievably simple. All we needed to do was just jump while charging. That's it. Opening the switch brings us to the next boss, called Yellow Belly, and he's not too tough. Just need to avoid his attack by jumping over him and butt stomping him and his little spring he spits out, and he'll go down easily. We press on through the levels until we find a new power-up. The jump boots, or the flying boots, I don't know what they are. And that will give us a higher jump. A super useful ability overall. We make it to the Forest of Fear. And man, this area was rough. There's spikes and birds everywhere, and if you get hit, you gotta do it all over again. A reoccurring theme we keep seeing in this game. Once we grab a few treasures, we run into our next boss, Jamano. And to be honest, he was actually pretty easy. All we needed to do was uncover the lanterns, and the fight is over. And by defeating him, we get a new music box. Only one remains. We go back to the first level, the forest area, where we pick up our final upgrade we needed to finish the game, the flippers, and that enhances our swimming ability. And the next boss we're facing is a fish boss named Pesse, which I think means fish in Italian. Anyhow, this guy isn't too difficult. All you need to do is drop enough cheese in the water and he'll balloon up to block the current and give us access to the chest. And that opens up the way to our last music box. But first, we need to defeat the boss blocking our way, a Nonster. Also, pretty simple boss fight. Just avoid the projectiles and then hit the boss with it. Nothing too fancy. By defeating him, we unlock the final music box and we head back to the temple to get our reward. And it turns out that evil-looking statue was lying all along. So now that we've unsealed the power of Rudy the Clown, we gotta face him, the final boss of the game. He only has one really dangerous attack, and that's when he tries to grab you. But it's easily avoided. It's super simple to... You really have to be bad to fall... Anyways, we managed to beat him and save the day. And we even got some treasure in the end. And that's Wario Land 3. It's actually a really clever game. It's also incredibly frustrating to play. So I'm glad I went through it. Heck, I might even watch a full 100% playthrough of it one day. But I'm pretty sure I won't ever play it again. Next, we have Silver, a game I don't think I've ever heard of, but basically, it's an action-adventure game with real-time combat. Anyways, we play as David, a young knight, and we're living peacefully in the outskirts of a small village with our wife and grandfather. Now, the island of Jera, where our story takes place, is ruled by Silver, an evil sorcerer. And he decides that he needs a wife, so he sends out his army to capture every woman on the island. And so David's wife gets captured and put on a ship, and we need to save her. But fighting an army and finding out where the ship went is a tall task indeed. So we join up with our grandfather and a rebel group who are plotting to get revenge on Silver for stealing their wives. We make our way to the Library of No, to make use of their telescope to find out where the boat is. Once we get there, we find out that it's been overtaken by imps. So we battle through the library and find our first magical weapon, the Ice Wand, which will come in handy later on. We go back to the lobby to open the magic door that was locked earlier, but in that lobby we find the son of Silver, Fuge. Fuge sentences David to death for betraying the Emperor, but David's grandfather rushes forward and sacrifices himself to buy some time for David to escape. We make our way through the library to a lift that sends us into a cavern where an incubus resides, and once we slay that incubus, that should deal with the imp problem. It's our first real boss fight, and our Ice Wand proves really useful against him. Once we defeat it, we head to the telescope, the spot where the ship was headed. It was the town of Rain. With the rebels, we sneak into Rain to find the ship, and we get our first ally, Sukune. She's an archer, and she's fairly useful until she runs out of arrows, then not so much. So we plow through the soldiers in Rain until we reach the docks, but we're too late. So we decide to go see the Oracle, and hopefully they can point us in the right direction. The Oracle mentions that Silver can only be defeated with the power of the 8 magic orbs. So off we go to find them. Our first orb we find is the Fire Orb held by the mage Orpheus. And since we were sent by the Oracle, he gives it to us willingly. Our second destination is the Land of Winter, where we'll fight a frost giant as our second boss. And this guy was also not too difficult. We mostly used our ranged fireball attacks that we gained with the Fire Orb. Once we defeat him, we get the Ice Orb. But before we go looking for the next orb, we head back to our house where we find it invaded by goblins. We clear them out and start exploring the area where we find our next ally, Vivian. She's a pretty good warrior. With our new ally, we now begin the search for the third orb. We have to go back to Rain in the lower quarters. We find a bar where an old man tells us the solution for a bell puzzle. And we also find a new ally called Jug. He's also a huge warrior too. We make our way to the bell area, and it's a really annoying and tight timing-based puzzle. But eventually we get it done, and that leads the way to the location of the third orb, an underwater cathedral. But before we can explore it, we call it there for Silver for this month. Finally, we have Phantasy Star III. I guess you could call it the black sheep of the series, and it's pretty long too. We're going to be playing with a translation patch, so the names might sound a little off. And we're also using a walking speed patch, so it'll make the game a bit quicker. Now, this game takes place 1,000 years after Phantasy Star II. We play as Kine, a prince of Rick, and we're about to get married with Marina. Now, there's two factions or races in this game. The Arakians, who control robots, and the Lions, who control monsters. And they've been hating each other for 1,000 years. So we start the wedding between Kine and Marina, but disaster strikes as a lion dragon kidnaps Marina. Kine is enraged and he demands the king to supply him with an army so he can invade lion lands and get his wife back. But instead, the king just sends Kine to jail to cool off. We get freed by a girl called Lena, and we resume our search for our bride-to-be. We find an android called Miyu along the way, and she joins the party. With the help of Miyu, we get access to a boat which drops us off next to a cave. In that cave, we find Lyle, who seems to know Kine, and he gives us back the sapphire he took from us. With the power of the sapphire, we get access to an ice world, which seems to be suffering of starvation, and access to a desert world where there is a town of robots there. They tell us that the weather control unit is busted and can only be repaired by a wren. And if you're asking what is a wren, it seems to be another cyborg type, kind of like Miyu. We find one in a nearby cave and he joins the party. We make our way to the weather control tower where Lyle is waiting for us. It seems like he's from the ice planet and he came here to fix the problem, but without a wren unit, he can't. And seeing that we have one, he joins the party. We travel back to a much greener ice world. Go back to the fishing village where we learn that we can reach the Lion Lands with the ferry now that the lake is unfrozen. We make our way to the Shusaran Castle where Lyle decides to test our strength for some reason. So we fight him man to man and we beat him. And for some reason Lena is here. She tells us that she was rescued by Lyle after she was attacked, and also that Marina is on an island to the north. We reach the castle of Sile where we find Marina behind another man. It seems like Marina is the king's daughter, which makes her a lion. The king is disgusted by the fact that Kine is an Arakian, so he fights us, but we prevail in the end. However, he does mention that Lena is also a princess from the land of Satera, the neighboring country of Rick, making her an Arakian as well. So Kine needs to choose which girl he wants as a wife. The chat chooses Marina. And so both of them get married and have a child called Ein. And we'll be playing as him from here on. 16 years pass and the kingdom is under attack by Arakian robots. Kine sends us off with Ren and Miyu to find a place called Satellite to stop the robots. We head to Shusaran where we see an older Lyle. He wishes he could join us, but unfortunately, he needs to protect his lands. As we're traveling the world, the Sile and Shusaran kingdoms get destroyed, and we find the survivors in the desert planet. Lyle, who's severely injured, wants us to find his daughter Lan. We get lost a few times, but eventually we find the captured princess and she joins the party. After taking Lan back to her father, he tells us to go to the lands of Rick, where a power stone might be located. In the dungeons of Rick, we find Lynn, the daughter of Lena, and she holds the topaz that will allow us to reach Satellite, but she won't give it willingly to traitorous lions, so we fight her. After a quick fight, she gives us the topaz and joins the party. After a bit of traveling, we run into the dragon we saw at the start of the game. And he wants to help us traverse the waters so we can reach Flotran and the satellite. Once we cross over, it's revealed that the dragon was Lyle all along. And he wants us to keep it a secret from Kyne as he dies. And so ends the session of Phantasy Star III for this month. And we can finally end this super long recap. I hope you guys enjoyed it, and I hope this helped you catch up with the long plays so far.